morning, Jon. Great to see you again.
Good morning, Paul. Good to see you.
Yeah, I listened to a fascinating keynote you gave at Sourcing Nederland. And what struck me is how you got parties who upfront didn't really seem to have incentive to work together to get on this new blockchain-based technology platform, because you've convinced them that, it is really innovate your way into the future or eventually be disrupted. And can you tell us a bit about how you got to do that? Because I think it's an amazing story.
Yeah, that's fine, Paul. I need to go a little bit back in time then. It's now 7 years ago that I started to be as the CEO of the Koopman Logistics Group, one of the leading logistics service providers in the automotive finished vehicle logistics industry. So transporting cars from factory to dealers and storing and adding value to these vehicles. And of course, like all industries, digitalisation is a key theme. And this is an industry where drivers still drive around with paper-based registration documents that you sign in the middle of the night, that the car is not damaged and that the car has been received.
Right.
More and more cross-border processes for used vehicles. And most of people driving a vehicle or buying a used vehicle are familiar with mileage fraud. People turning back the mileage to sell it at a better price. So there's a lot of fraud in general terms in the industry, which all can be fixed with technology, conceptually in principle. If we would do everything digital, then of course we could track and trace, and we could prove much better what the previous mileage of a vehicle was. So basically, on your question, how were you able to bring parties together around the blockchain network, because that's what we did with Vinturas, is first the inefficiencies in this industry, and on the other hand, the realization that if the technology is there, if we do not act together, somebody else will. The Uberization of the industry, right, of course, was also a threat for the finished vehicle logistics industry.
I see. And so if I understand correctly, what you guys did is you developed a solution whereby every step that a vehicle goes through in terms of location and things people are doing to it between the factory and the dealer, or between dealers if it's a used vehicle, is all registered on a blockchain-based platform. Yeah. And thereby you have this unbroken chain of custody and you can see who did what.
Yeah, exactly. So we choose blockchain technology for a number of reasons. One is what you call provenance. So what happened with the car before in the chain? Think about mileage. And the other one was trust, because if you work together, you need to share data. And the example I always use for the Dutch listeners. There are remote areas in every country. In the Netherlands, it's Delfzijl. So from a technology perspective, the time is over. The 2 half-empty trucks unload their new vehicles on the same dealer compound in a remote location as Delfzijl in the Netherlands. You don't want this. This is inefficient.
So there's a big climate component to this.
Yeah, and on top of that, of course, if only one truck is driving with, you can load 8 or 9 new vehicles on an car transporter instead of 4. Then of course the benefit for the environment is there. There's financial benefit, there's sustainability, environmental benefit. Right. So from a technology perspective, these times are over. And another argument, there are many positive reasons to start this initiative like this, is that in the automotive industry, in general terms, dealers still cannot give their clients who bought a new vehicle let's say, UPS experience. The book that you bought has left the distribution center. It's on its way. It's now in the next distribution center, and in the coming 3 hours, it will be delivered by your parcel carrier. This doesn't exist in the automotive world, and many people who have had the experience of receiving a new car through a dealer know that the dealer will say, okay, I know it's been produced in a factory somewhere in Spain, but I will tell you when it has arrived, when you can drive it.
Right. Yeah, it is a bit odd that if you drop $50 on something, you get track and trace all the way, and then you drop 50,000 on a new car, and it's like, you gotta kind of pray and hope.
Yeah, exactly. So this is if you look at it, this is a weird situation in an industry that has would be my statement, not invested enough in the outbound logistics process, because
Right.
technology right, and this is possible. And of course, the automotive industry has been under big pressure in the last decades already, and now under pressure of electric vehicles creating new models. So logistics is under invested, but it's crazy, and it leads to huge inefficiencies that this is not possible yet. So we use blockchain technology that provides this provenance. Can I be sure that the mileage of this vehicle is indeed the mileage that you tell me? This
Right.
provenance, but also this track and trace possibility. If all the partners in the supply chain, from the factory in Spain, driving to the Netherlands to a distribution point, from the distribution point to the dealer, work together in a blockchain environment and share their data in that environment, knowing for sure that those data that they post on the network will not be or cannot be used by somebody else for other purposes. Of course, the Google Facebook issue, where people take your data for
Right.
they make a lot of money out of that. So trust again that the data that I share with you are only for this purpose and for nothing else was a key reason to choose for this technology.
And did you have a lot of explaining to do? Because, I mean, blockchain can be a very opaque kind of technology to people who aren't really into the actual technical aspects of it.
Yes.
And this concept that your data is owned by everybody in the network has a copy of your data, but nobody can use it without your permission because it's encrypted by you and by them. Is that something that's really an issue when selling this, that you have to explain all this?
Yes, definitely. The technology itself, the way it works, generally speaking, is not the problem. We designed a blockchain network for the supply chain, for logistics. You need to think about that. You need to design that with good business people and good technical people.
Yeah.
But then to explain how the technology works in reality to CEOs and CTOs of companies that, of course, are familiar with ERP, do I choose for SAP or something else, that are familiar with databases and they know how they work. But one, they are not familiar with the workings of blockchain, the background in the technology of blockchain. And of course, what you lack is the fact that there's no, let's say, proven application on the level of the logistics service providers that you can point at and say, look, these guys are doing it.
Right.
You should do it. And there's a few big examples in the world for blockchain at the moment. This is the famous trade lens of Maersk and IBM. That started a few years ago and only went live 2 years ago. So it's relatively young, I mean to say. There's in the financial world, there's a few initiatives like WeTrade. There's Food Trust with Walmart and IBM. So IBM invested heavily in providing a few global applications that work. But for the, let's say, the industry below that, below these huge investments, of course, blockchain is still a dream that conceptually people can understand, but stepping into the dark to a certain extent means you need to do a lot of work to convince people to make those steps.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, even if the technology itself can be a bit opaque and hard to understand, the benefits to businesses and people are fairly easy to understand. And I think we're at the point where there's not enough familiarity with the concept. It's like a gearbox in a car. Very few people can actually tell you how the gearbox is put together, but everybody who can drive stick shift uses one thoughtlessly, right?
Yeah.
And we need to get to this kind of familiarity with Bitcoin where it's not scary. It doesn't matter if you don't get the details because you get how to use it and achieve the outcomes you want.
Yeah, exactly. So during the journey over the past 2.5 years, where on one hand I had to convince investors to start with companies who are competitors that, okay, guys, it makes sense to work together and it makes sense to invest money into this. During that journey, where part one was successful, so we could start designing this blockchain network and creating it, thinking about how to use it. More and more, we've been shifting in our thinking, but also communication process to and this is the value that we're going to deliver to you. This is what it means from a pure applications perspective. To give you one example, I'm not talking about technology anymore. All these logistic service providers work with a number of subcontractors, a flexible organization. Sometimes it's busy, sometimes it's not. So you don't want to have your fixed fleet standing empty and not being used. So you use smaller companies as subcontractors. Generally speaking, in the market, there's no digital interface between those subcontractors, who are small papa mama companies often, and the service providers. So one of the things you can do over a network like this is to, of course, you can connect in a simple way to these subcontractors, web interface, apps, and all that stuff, in a standardized process that you can use with we had 5 investing logistic service providers. So if I'm the small company, I can get access to these 5 companies that can give me work rather than pick up the phone, etc. And we are cutting out the middleman in this process. Of course, for those who know blockchain, one of the promises is cutting out the middleman.
Right. Yeah.
The middleman being freight forwarders who collect requests from papa mama companies. Do you have a job for me? My truck is in Antwerp in Belgium. I'm looking for loads. Can you give that to me? And these freight forwarders then calling the logistic service providers.
Yeah.
Those costs you can eliminate, and there's therefore value for the smaller company, and there's value for the logistics.
Everybody else wins. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they are becoming digitalized and dematerialized and etc. That's very interesting. I think that if you look at the whole system, you see that there's a logistics decentralization, but there wasn't a digital decentralization. There was, in the information flow, it was centralized in these forwarders, and that is now the information flow is starting to match the actual organization.
Yeah, and what you then also see is that there's also, this changes, obviously, business models of freight forwarders. So not all, when people start to realize what this transparency means for business in general terms, they start to think and scratch their head. And another example is damage. Of course, these millions of vehicles that are transported through Europe, there's sometimes a scratch or a damage. And the damage reflects a significant amount of money. If you have a scratch on your car, it's easy 500 euros in costs. So there's an interest from some parties in the chain to hide damages, not to make them transparent.
Right.
To blame them on somebody else. And discussions I've had with larger companies over the past year. Okay, Jon, so if this is registered, then I lose my opportunity to play a little bit with the data. And I'm not sure whether, tomorrow this is interesting for me. And at the same time, I was talking to insurance companies who said, one of my problems is I don't have real digital data, so I have to write off 1 million euro per year because nobody wants to pay for the damage.
Yeah.
So these are changing business models in the industry. And of course, people are saying, I'm not sure.
Not everyone's incentives are aligned to become that transparent.
Yeah, and digitalization will happen anyway.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If we don't do it, somebody else will come in. The Ubers will come in.
Right.
And they will clear this because the technology is there again.
Yeah, I mean, if a number of freight forwarders had done what you did 10 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, true. And maybe the technology was not the blockchain technology was not there, but of course the fastest mover has the biggest chance to win in the ever more digitalizing world. That is by definition true.
So just to be clear, the people buying your service are the car dealers in the Netherlands right now.
Let me phrase it a bit broader. So what we have created is of course we call it a digital ecosystem.
Right.
So everybody or all parties that transacts in this finished vehicle logistics ecosystem, from the factories that produce a car to the small companies that transport the cars to the bigger ones to the dealers who want to tell their customers where is my vehicle. They're all and damage handlers, as I just mentioned. They are all stakeholders. So all stakeholders can use the data on the network once they are shared by the parties that provide the data. So if a logistics service provider says to another logistics service provider, hey, it makes sense, we both have a contract to deliver vehicles to the dealer compound in the remote area, they'll sell for the Dutch people. I'm doing this for brand A and B, and you are doing this for brand C and D. Let's work together. Then the ecosystem provides the functionality to do so. If a dealer says, hey, I would like to tell my customer where the vehicle is in the chain, then he can use that through Vinturas, provided, of course, that all logistics service providers are connected. Also, the Spanish company driving from Spain to, there's a distribution point in Born in the Netherlands of Koopman, for example. This Spanish company also needs to be connected then.
Right. And how do you do with the parties who aren't on the network yet?
So Vinturas is now the parties that are on the network are the early investors, the 5 companies I talked about, and their immediate benefit is they can work with their subcontractors in a digital process and eliminate the costs of these freight forwarders, for example. And in the discussion with the OEMs, so the manufacturing companies, the plea, of course, is please give a call to the Spanish company,
right,
driving to the Netherlands, and ask them to connect to the network, so you can give your dealers the end-to-end visibility that everybody's looking for in the supply chain. And that the platform is ready now since the beginning of this year, is being used, and this process is ongoing as we speak. Because the network has to grow with more and more.
Both upstream and downstream. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So right now you're the CEO of a growth company, and your job is to bring this to a certain level. When do you get to say, okay, my mission as exec is accomplished, I can hand this off to somebody else? I've done my job. When is the job done for you?
For me, the job is my job was, because I stopped at Vinturas at the 1st of February, to create a platform to make sure it's operational and functional, and the members, the investors can use it. This is the situation that Vinturas is at the moment. Of course, there's always additional work to be done in further development and fine tuning, and this will continue, driven by the owners of the platform. And as people working in technology know, there's never an end to development. There's always new idea.
Yes.
But the pace of digitalization is always slower than you expect. People need to adapt, changing business models, changing working habits. So it's a step-by-step implementation of the network that has now been created, which was a very interesting, fruitful journey, working in new technology with the developing parties, bringing all the parties on one line of what are we going to do, how are we going to do it.
It's quite an achievement. So what's next for you, Jon?
This is the space I love. The world is all about digitalization, supply chain visibility in this industry or in another, and certainly COVID has increased the need for supply chain visibility, not only in the automotive, where you've seen factories stopping producing last year, and then certainly going back to production. And what you read now in the papers, of course, is the shortage of chips, because so now production stops again.
Oh man,
which is a huge impact. Which is all for the logistics expert, the classical bullwhip effect.
Right.
Overreacting in the chain. I've seen it a few times in my professional past.
Yeah.
And the only solution for this is real-time end-to-end visibility on all aspects of the chain. Otherwise, you get in this inbound tier supplier world, people who are seeing increase or decrease in demand, and this is conceptually multiplied as further deeper.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the current time will be the basis for like MBA business cases for a decade.
Yeah,
it's really classic.
It's to a certain extent classic. The theory materializes, so you want, but the effects, of course, are devastating from a financial profitability perspective.
Yeah.
A few companies I read that have enough chips because they kind of saw this coming, and a year ago already said, hey, we need to prevent this, and we need to invest in inventories just to make sure of that.
Yeah.
So have not done so, and now with devastating effects because of the thousands of parts that go into a new vehicle. Of course, all needs to be orchestrated, which is
right. Yeah, and it's compounded by factory problems because of COVID, because of issues with getting the right workers in the right place at the right time. Yeah. It's compounded by an offshoot of blockchain technology, namely cryptocurrency and mining. Some of the large chip foundries just figured that there's a lot of money waiting for Nvidia and AMD to bake the chips that can also mine crypto.
Yeah. Okay.
From my own perspective, I'm guilty too, because I'm in content creation, and the best encoding chips are also the kinds of chips that are very useful for self-driving systems or very useful for mining. So I'm also one of the buyers saying, give me more silicon at any price.
Yeah. We're all guilty, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. So back on your question, the supply chain, end-to-end supply chain visibility is more relevant than ever.
Absolutely.
People can see in front of them what the consequences if you do not have those processes under control. So I expect a really acceleration of efforts to manage the supply chain in a much better way, generally speaking, for industries than it has been done over the past 10 years.
Right, and to do it in a reliable, low cost, and universally accessible way is going to be a huge deal, because the emphasis on climate and on making sure that you have your carbon footprint mapped back to the source. IKEA is doing this very ambitious project where they're not just saying we want to be carbon neutral ourselves in our process, but also in our products and the use of our products out there in the world, which is going to require some kind of bookkeeping at scale and at very low cost, because the margins on their stuff aren't huge and the scale is massive.
Yeah. So it all comes together in let's say digitalization provides all these benefits that you just described almost, automatically is not a word, but intrinsic in that the carbon footprint will be less. And driving to remote areas is the best example that people can all appeal to, but there's a lot more. Think about the paperwork. Every vehicle has this one paper document, and then that has to be signed and then sent back to the office and checked and controlled. But many trees are felled for this paper, and if you make the calculation,
and then it gets put in a binder in a closet, and then in an archive, and then
save them for 7 years or so. Away. Yeah, it's crazy. So there's so much opportunity to do the right things from a business perspective, so you want, but also from a climate sustainability perspective. So there will be a huge drive in the coming 10 years, and it's not the technology that will stop the progression. It's the pace in which companies can adapt with new working processes and new business models that define the speed of transition.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reflecting on this with a driving instructor recently, just catching up, and it's like, I hope to be able to get back to work because of the lockdown measures, and it's a contactberoep, as they say in Dutch, like a job that requires to be in close proximity to your customer. And then I'm like, but are you not interested in cross training? Because I don't think my kids are ever going to learn to drive. They're 6 and 8 now, but
yeah. I think so too. My two children are 30 plus, and they don't own a car because they don't need it, and
They have an app.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They have an app, and if they want any mobility, they go to the app and they find the mobility they need at that moment in time.
Right.
This is
It's very interesting times, and I'm really glad to see you move into this space and from an industry that isn't, it's not like social media where it's this, it has this reputation of constantly driving innovation and being very experimental and disruptive to itself.
Yeah. It's like many other industries, like probably the majority of the industries. It's the classic environment where people go to work, do a job that they've been doing for many years with loyalty and dedication, and we want to make the best out of it. But only, of course, a thin layer in the industry of these high-end social media, very innovative companies. And I would argue 95% of the companies are just trying to work hard every day and trying to make their living by driving, working in warehouses, working in production, just make it work. And those people also, everybody working in those processes need to become familiar with what the digital age can offer, which inevitably leads to the necessity of new skills and the ability to work in a different process, which takes time.
Yeah, during the recent interview with Matt Hellman, it came up that like the age where you study something and obtain a master's degree, and that sets your career until your retirement, that time is over. Yes, you do have to gain that level of knowledge and expertise, because many jobs are very, very specialized and have intensive knowledge requirements. But then lifelong learning is like a 90s term, I believe, but we haven't even begun to see the true impact of that.
Yeah, I fully agree. And luckily, all the young people.
The hardest thing for you in this journey, in the Vinturas journey, where were you like, oh my goodness, how do I deal with this?
Is to make the bridge between, in the discussions with people, make the bridge between the applications that we would deliver, that what people would understand, to the application of technology, because we had to make some choices of how do we bring the data to the network, etc. In an environment where, by definition, all of the 5 members, investors, did not all come from a 100% synchronized view of this is how we see the future. I'm living in country A, I see the world in my country and environment like this. In country B, I have different views. So keeping everybody on board, also making sure you keep focused, basically saying, yes, we could do this, but no, we're not going to do it because first we're going to do this. If you think about the broader concept of the network, you could say, hey, can we not also engage leasing companies? Because during the lifetime of the vehicle, there are many events like maintenance and repairs that you want to capture. Can you do that when you have the network? Yes, you could. Great idea. But no, we are supply chain people.
Right. It's technically possible, but it's not our focus.
So the biggest effort basically is to keep everybody aligned on this is the point at the horizon. This is where we're heading towards. We park all the other things, and this is what's needed from you to help me in this process. And this is the collective future we're going to create.
So alliance management and focus.
Yeah, and of course, with alliance management is the word that everybody uses in the blockchain space is the governance. How do we decide to get together? In what process? And how do we meet? What do we talk about? The whole governance. If looking back, the most complex aspect was that aspect.
Nobody mentioned the word fork.
No. I happen to know a bit what it is, but no. So the technology space, you have good IT people who know what they're doing, who have an opinion about the application of the technology as such, or solutions that had to be created.
Was it hard to find talent in this space? Because I could briefly talk to your CTO, but I was impressed. He knew his stuff.
Yeah. So you need on the user side people who understand the business inside out and who understand and know IT. And we were lucky under these 5 companies to find a core of people who really understood what the technology could bring and understood the business. So that worked, I have to say, very, very well. And then the rest is working together with the company providing the infrastructure. We worked with IBM and translating core technology with business processes, bringing it all together and make sure you find the right solution in this situation for the functionality that you want to create.
Right.
So that was let's say the easy part. Hard work, a lot of talking, make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That was relatively clear. The complexity is, in general terms, working with parties that have been started working as, and of course, are educated, the CEOs, as competitors. So working together with your competitor is not what made you successful in business. Yeah? What made you successful is be better than your competitor, not work together. Working together and creating this point at the horizon in a world which is totally new for everybody from a technology perspective. And what can blockchain really bring? And Jon, I've read this in the newspaper about blockchain. Is it true? And how should we look at that?
Yeah.
So it's a journey. It has been a mission, but I'm very proud that we achieved that mission and established a network that's operational and running and delivers a great promise for this industry segment and conceptually also for the other supply chain segments.
Excellent. So would you be interested in doing venture coaching and helping younger entrepreneurs integrate some of these lessons that you've learned? Because I think a lot of the achievement that you had with Vinturas is based on things that to young technical founders don't feel like work, right? There's this very much a legacy of the kind of Silicon Valley startup mentality. You have to focus on your product and your customer, because that will lead to success, which is true. However, failing to manage your alliances and keep your focus is what will lead to failure. So there's kind of a blindness there sometimes, and also a perceived gap between startup dynamics and corporate dynamics. However, essentially, these are business dynamics at a different scale.
Correct.
So I think it's very, very valuable for somebody with a little bit more experience under their belts and in these different environments to help coach the innovators and people in this country and in the world who are going to make a difference.
Yeah, on your question, happy to do so, Paul, because I went together with a lot of people through the journey, and we learned a lot. And as you heard me say, it's about, of course, having a good business concept. Which problem are you going to fix? Like the middleman example or the mileage I gave. Who's willing to pay for that? And how are you sure about that?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's basically about governance, because if you create a blockchain network, it is about working together with other parties. And the success of the whole enterprise, apart from funding, of course, is successful working together with other parties. Create this point at the horizon and bring people there in manageable steps that they can all understand.
And make it big enough for network effects to occur so that then everybody else wants to join and you don't have to expend that same effort.
What we all want if we create a network, of course. Yeah. No, so happy to support anybody with a question. Happy to answer.
Very cool.
LinkedIn, of course, so that will work.
Yeah, I'll put your profile in the show notes.
Okay. That's fine.
Thank you very, very much for your time and for everything you've shared today. That's really very nice.
Thanks for the opportunity, Paul. I really appreciated it.
No, absolutely, my pleasure. And so you'll hear from me soon when I have the draft ready.
Okay, thank you very much. That's okay.
All right. Have a wonderful day and a very nice weekend.
Okay, you too, Paul.
All right. Bye, Jon.
Bye.